Picture this. It's Halloween night, and somewhere, someone is dressed as the Headless Horseman. Everyone knows the Headless Horseman. Everyone knows Sleepy Hollow. Everyone knows Ichabod Crane. But almost no one knows the real story. This is not a story about a hero fighting evil. This is not a story where good triumphs over evil. The ambiguity is deliberate. It's brilliant. And it's what makes this story far more sophisticated and far more disturbing than any adaptation has ever captured. Before we descend into the haunted valley of Sleepy Hollow, I want to ask you something. Tonight we travel to a glen in the Hudson Valley of New York, just after the Revolutionary War. We will meet Ichabod Crane, a man whose greed and superstition will lead him into the night. We will meet his rival, Brom Bones, a local tough guy who wants the same prize. We will meet Katrina Van Tassel, the daughter of the richest man in the valley, the inheritance both men are competing for. We will attend a party where ghost stories are told and warnings are given. We will ride through haunted woods where every shadow might be death on horseback. We will witness a chase that ends with a hat, a shattered pumpkin, and a man who is never seen again. And we will ask the question that has haunted readers for 200 years. What really happened to Ichabod Crane? This is not the Disney cartoon. This is not the Tim Burton film. This is Washington Irving's original tale, the birth of American Gothic horror. This is the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Welcome to the Midnight Archives. In the bosom of one of those spacious coves which indent the eastern shore of the Hudson River, there lies a small market town. This is the 1790s. The Revolutionary War ended only 15 years ago. About 2 miles from Tarrytown there is a glen. The Dutch called this place Sleepy Hollow. It's an apt name. Whatever the cause, Sleepy Hollow is haunted. Not metaphorically haunted, not quaintly atmospheric, actually haunted, the most haunted place in all of America. One dominated the others. The Headless Horseman, he was a Hessian trooper. During one of the battles near Sleepy Hollow, a cannonball took his head clean off. They buried him in the churchyard. But he didn't rest. Every night when the church bell tolls midnight, he rises from his grave, and he rides through Sleepy Hollow at tremendous speed, searching for what he lost, searching for his head. There is one place of safety. But if he catches you before you reach the bridge, the stories differ about what happens then. Multiple witnesses over the years had seen him. This was not folklore from the old country. This was American. The Headless Horseman was real. Everyone in Sleepy Hollow believed this with absolute certainty. And that belief is where our story really begins, near the church. Near the graveyard where the Hessian was buried, stood a schoolhouse, and it had just received a new schoolteacher, a man named Ichabod Crane. His name was Ichabod Crane. Washington Irving gives us a physical description that borders on cruel. Ichabod was tall, very tall, but thin to the point of emaciation. He had a small, flat-topped head that sat atop a long, scrawny neck. To see him striding along the profile of a hill on a windy day, Irving writes, that's the image we're meant to have. But Ichabod was also educated. He came to Sleepy Hollow as the new schoolteacher. His teaching philosophy could be summed up in a single phrase from the Bible. He ruled through fear and physical punishment. The irony was that Ichabod himself was constantly afraid. Outside the schoolhouse, though, he was different. He also boarded with his students' families. He was rootless, dependent, one step away from destitution at all times. And he was desperate to change that. That was everything he owned. He was rootless, dependent, one step away from destitution at all times. And he was desperate to change that. Two traits defined Ichabod Crane's character. The first was greed. Ichabod was consumed by a desire for wealth he didn't have. He would stand there mentally inventorying everything, and then his imagination would go further. This was the American dream in its most naked, acquisitive form. So he needed a shortcut. He needed to marry money. The second defining trait was superstition. Ichabod Crane believed absolutely in the supernatural. He believed every word. Witches were real. He loved hearing ghost stories, but he also terrified himself with them. He would try to maintain his courage by singing psalms. Ichabod Crane was a walking contradiction. He was both pitiable and contemptible. We're not sure if we want him to succeed or fail. We're not sure what we hope will happen to him. And that uncertainty is important, because when Ichabod Crane vanishes, Washington Irving refuses to make it simple. Now let's meet the prize. About half a mile from the schoolhouse stood one of the most beautiful and prosperous farms in the entire region. When Ichabod Crane first saw this farm, his mind immediately began working. Washington Irving describes Ichabod's thought process in language that borders on grotesque. And then he began calculating what it would all be worth. The fantasy consumed him. And then he met Katrina Van Tassel. She was 18 years old. She was rosy-cheeked, conventionally beautiful by the standards of her time and place. She had a reputation as a little of a coquette. Most importantly, she was Balthus Van Tassel's only child. Did Ichabod Crane love Katrina Van Tassel? No, absolutely not. But Katrina herself was completely irrelevant to him. Irving makes this brutally clear. His fantasies about her were economic, not romantic. Marriage was a business transaction. Love was beside the point. But Ichabod knew how to play the game. So he began courting Katrina, and Katrina seemed receptive. But there was a problem, a significant problem, a rival, Abraham Van Brunt, known universally and exclusively as Brom Bones. Brom was everything Ichabod was not. Irving describes Brom's physical presence in terms that suggest barely contained power. He was the leader of the young men in the area. He rode a fierce horse named Daredevil, and Brom Bones was also courting Katrina Van Tassel. Now, when Brom showed interest, but Ichabod didn't withdraw. Brom was frustrated by this, so Brom turned to mockery and pranks instead. But Ichabod wouldn't leave, and Katrina seemed to enjoy it. Irving suggests the latter. But for Ichabod and Brom, this was not a game. The rivalry was reaching its peak. One of them would win Katrina and her inheritance. The other would lose everything, and the resolution was coming. Soon, on a fine autumn afternoon, Ichabod Crane received an invitation. It was exactly the kind of event where Ichabod could advance his courtship. This was his chance. He spent the entire day preparing. He borrowed a horse from Hans van Ripper. The horse was named Gunpowder. And Gunpowder was not an impressive animal. And Ichabod Crane on this horse was pure comedy. But in Ichabod's mind he was magnificent. He rode to the Van Tassel farm as the afternoon sun slanted golden through the autumn trees. The place was full of people, and there, among his gang of friends, sat Brom Bones. But first, the feast. This is one of the most famous passages Washington Irving ever wrote. The tables were loaded with autumn abundance. Why does Irving spend so long describing the food? Because this is what Ichabod sees when he looks at Katrina. The food represents the wealth Ichabod is trying to marry into, and he ate enormously. After the feast came dancing, the furniture was pushed back. Ichabod Crane prided himself on his dancing ability. He was not good at it, but he didn't realize how he looked. Katrina danced with him. Meanwhile, Brom Bones sat in the corner brooding. Brom tried to show off with feats of strength. As the evening progressed and the dancing wound down, the guests began gathering for a different kind of entertainment. They started with Revolutionary War tales, and then the stories shifted from history to legend. Tales of Sleepy Hollows. But all the stories eventually came around to the same subject, the Headless Horseman. Everyone had an encounter to report, and then Brom Bones spoke. He claimed that he had once met the horseman himself. Brom told this story while staring directly at Ichabod. Was it a true account? Ichabod, listening, grew pale. He was terrified, and everyone in the room could see it. The party began to break up around midnight, but Ichabod lingered. He needed to speak with Katrina privately. This was his moment. He drew Katrina aside. What happened during this conversation? Washington Irving never tells us. All we know is what Irving shows us. When Ichabod emerged from this private conversation, he looked desolate and chapfallen. He looked like a man who had just lost everything. Something had gone very, very wrong. Did Katrina reject his proposal? We'll never know. Irving made sure of that. What we do know is this. Ichabod's hopes were crushed. He had gambled everything on this courtship, and he had lost. He walked out to the fence where gunpowder was tied, climbed onto the old horse's back with none of the confidence he'd felt earlier, and rode away from the Van Tassel farm, into the darkness, into the night, into the most haunted parts of Sleepy Hollow, alone. It was after midnight, the witching hour, the time when the boundary between the living world and the dead world is thinnest, when ghosts walk and demons hunt, and nothing is as it should be. The moon was up, but not consistently visible. Ichabod Crane was alone on the road, and every one of those stories echoed in his mind. The landscape itself seemed hostile. Every sound was magnified in the silence. That last sound made Ichabod's heart race. He tried to calm himself by singing psalms, but his voice quavered, trembled, cracked on the high notes. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. But he did fear evil. He passed through increasingly ominous territory, landmarks he recognized from the ghost stories. First, the spot where Major Andre had been captured, and towering over this spot, a massive tulip tree. Ichabod's fear mounted with every step. Ahead was the stream. If Ichabod could reach that bridge, he'd be safe. But first he had to get there, and between here and the bridge, in the shadows ahead, something moved. Ichabod stopped gunpowder. Ahead, in the darkness, something, a shape, a presence, something huge and black and utterly still. Ichabod's heart hammered in his chest. What was it? He started to breathe again. He kicked gunpowder gently, urging the horse forward. And the thing moved. It stood up, revealed itself as what it was, but a figure. A massive figure on horseback, enormous in the darkness. Ichabod tried to call out. The figure didn't respond, motionless as a statue. Ichabod tried to call out. Ichabod kicked gunpowder into a faster walk. The figure began to move. Ichabod's terror was complete now. So they rode together. They passed through a patch of moonlight. And Ichabod saw. This was the Headless Horseman, and he had found Ichabod Crane. Ichabod kicked gunpowder as hard as he could. Behind them, the sound of pursuit. The horseman was gaining on them. The road was terrible. Ichabod lost his stirrups. He clung to Gunpowder's neck with both arms. Behind him, the pounding of hooves, the bridge. He looked ahead and saw it. The hoofbeats behind him were almost on top of him now. They reached the bridge. They were crossing. Ichabod dared to look back. The horseman was not stopping. He was reaching for something. He lifted it, and he threw it. It struck him. The impact was tremendous. Ichabod tumbled from Gunpowder's back, and there was only darkness. Morning broke over Sleepy Hollow with golden autumn light. Hans Van Ripper was up early to do his morning chores, and as he walked out toward his barn, he noticed something. His horse was back. Gunpowder was grazing peacefully near his usual spot by the gate, but no sign of Ichabod Crane. Van Ripper checked the barn. No response. The schoolteacher was gone. Word spread quickly. They followed the route Ichabod would have taken home from the Van Tassel farm, and there in the mud they found hoofprints. The two sets of prints ran parallel for a while. The tracks led to the bridge, and there, on the ground near the bridge, they found Ichabod's hat, and beside it, a shattered pumpkin. The searchers stared at these items. They searched further. Nothing. No sign of Ichabod Crane. He had vanished completely. The search continued for days. Eventually, they had to accept that Ichabod Crane was gone. His belongings at Hans Van Ripper's house were examined. There wasn't much, nothing that explained his disappearance. The schoolhouse stood empty. Eventually, a new teacher was hired. And then, shortly after Ichabod's disappearance, Brom Bones and Katrina Van Tassel announced their engagement. They married soon after. Brom settled into comfortable life as a wealthy farmer. But people noticed something odd about Brom Bones. Whenever someone mentioned Ichabod Crane's disappearance, Brom would laugh. And he laughed especially hard at the mention of the pumpkin. Why? People talked about it. The community divided into two camps. Theory 1. The Headless Horseman was real. Ichabod Crane encountered him that night on the road. Ichabod is dead. Theory 2. Brom Bones committed murder. Brom had motive. Brom had opportunity. Brom had means. The pumpkin itself is suspicious. And Brom's story at the party about racing the horseman seems like rehearsal. Perfect murder disguised as a ghost story. And Brom laughs at the pumpkin detail because it's his private joke, his secret triumph, the proof that he got away with it. Both theories make sense. Both theories have evidence supporting them. Both theories explain the facts. And Washington Irving never tells us which is true. He gives us the hoofprints. He gives us the pumpkin. He gives us the pumpkin. He gives us Brom's laughter. The ambiguity is deliberate. The uncertainty is the point. Years after these events, Washington Irving includes a postscript to his tale. An old farmer from Sleepy Hollow travels to New York City. "I can tell you what really happened," he says. And he tells them, Ichabod Crane didn't die. Is this true? Irving doesn't confirm it, so we can't trust him. Which means we're left with three possibilities. The truth is unknowable, and that unknowability is what makes this story brilliant. The legend of Sleepy Hollow is not really about whether ghosts exist. It's about stories. Washington Irving is asking fundamental questions. Can we ever really know the truth? Or is truth always just the most convincing narrative? Several themes emerge. The power of belief, the unreliability of narrative, the birth of American mythology, class and social mobility, the dark side of ambition. Why does the ambiguity matter? but by refusing to choose. Irving creates something much more powerful. Washington Irving was born in 1783 in New York City. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow was published in 1820 as part of a collection called The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, Gent. More importantly, it was one of the first truly American works. The story's enduring power is remarkable. Most adaptations do this, but Irving's genius was refusing to do that. Sleepy Hollow is a real place, and the mystery remains. We'll never know, and that's what makes it brilliant, because America is a place where reinvention is possible. Ichabod Crane vanished into legend, and legend is more powerful than fact. Every autumn, when leaves fall and darkness comes early, the Headless Horseman rides again, and somewhere on dark roads, men vanish without explanation. What do you think happened to Ichabod Crane? Leave your theory in the comments. If this exploration of America's most famous ghost story moved you. Until next time, stay curious. And remember, some mysteries are never meant to be solved. Welcome to where pumpkins can be weapons, where legend becomes more real than truth, and every dark road leads to a question with no answer.